一个教授，他在那边就是教授 PD 的课程。那他也是就是2001年就是在我们在 PD Convention， 就是他是2001年的主办人，就是 PD Convention 是就是在 PD 界，就是大概每2年或2、3年会举办一次，就是很大的一个聚会，然后会把很多就是全世界的 PD 的玩家，然后他们会有研讨会跟表演，就是很多相关的东西都串起来。那我是在就是我们2001年的时候，我跟就是阿乱，我们有到就是威马那边去参加2001的那个 PD Convention， 那也是在那个时候就认识了 Max， 因为他是那次的主办人，那他也就是在 PD 的一个论坛，就是 PD 界是非常活跃的一个就是算是一个黑客级的人物。那这次是因为 Max 他刚好说他要到亚洲来发表一个论文，就是他的这个 Theremin， 就是 Theremin 这个乐器是一个就是不用手就可以碰触的一个乐器。那我想应该等一下 Max 会介绍。那就是话不多说，我们就就是大家先掌声鼓励欢迎一下 Max。那今天的演讲 the speech of Max might be in English, but there's no translation today. So please prepare your ear for the lesson. Okay.
All right. Do I need the microphone, or do you understand me like this?
Or is this better like this? With or without? You choose.
With. It's better for people to listen behind.
Okay, well, then I will use the microphone. So, thank you very much for having me. And I'm not an English native speaker, so either, and unfortunately I'm not able to deliver my presentation in Chinese or Taiwanese, so please excuse that. And what I will show you today is the very early stage of my research. I'm currently teaching and also doing a PhD at the Bauhaus University in Weimar. And yeah, this is very much unfinished, and I'm actually, from my education, I'm an artist, and through this PhD I more and more I write papers and I submit to conferences, and I'm getting into different formats like writing papers. So this feels really strange to me sometimes. Writing papers is something that makes me feel like I'm a con artist, or I'm faking something. I'm just using the style of something, of a science, and applying it to my work. And I was talking to a good friend of mine with whom I wrote another paper together, and he said, well, this is very common, it's very normal at our university. He's in San Diego, California, and he said at the university there's a psychological service and they offer their help, and this is actually called imposture syndrome. And many students have that actually because they're getting into a field of science or a field of practice, and before they even notice, they're aspiring something, and before they even notice, they're already in it. And so to help this identity crisis, there's actually help there. Okay. So this is for instance, this is one illustration I made for one of these papers. So I enjoy also to mock this kind of style required in these papers. So I heard it has been already mentioned. So 2 years ago I organized the Pure Data Convention, and this is how I got to know some people from here. And so this is a picture from Weimar. This is just the first day of the convention, the registration. And so everybody just got their orange bags and checked in. So I'm working since 4 years at the Bauhaus University teaching, and since last October I'm a PhD student there as well. And when I saw the opportunity to, so I work a lot in this programming environment, pure data, and I saw the opportunity as an employee of the university to bring the community to Weimar, and I've been to the conventions in Montreal and Sao Paulo, and then I wanted to organize one in Germany. And I don't know where the next will be. Some people told me it might be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but it has become quite there. So I don't know, maybe Taipei would be a better choice, but I don't know. So I have a couple of slides. The next slide explains a little bit what I'm fascinated in. Then I have 2 more slides with other works that I find very intriguing with my current research and what inspired me to do what I am just doing. And then I'll explain what I'm actually doing. So don't be confused. So that is a picture I did with this very crappy consumer camera. It's a 4 years old camera from Sony, and back in the time it was very revolutionary to have this function. You turn this around and then the pictures get stitched together. Now every phone has it, so it's not something exciting anymore. So I did this, but instead of turning around, I was doing a parallel movement. So instead of rotating like this, I was passing by. In this case, from the plane, from the window of the plane. And what I find very fascinating about it is that on this little device, of course, there's some kind of processor and there's some kind of image processing happening and some kind of image recognition. So by not using it the way it was intended to be used, it reveals in a kind of a reverse engineering way what the algorithm on the camera actually is. So what happens here is, of course, because the parallax then is not anymore 1 point, then during that passing by movement, the camera looks for the most similar pixels on this axis, and if there are many pixels matching, then it glues that together, and if there's some part, of course, which is more far away, then gets repeated all over. So you have here this nice smeary effect because it's repeating the same pixels over and over. And I really like this a lot, and that kind of aesthetic got really popular since it's all these glitch festival and broken imagery. And most of the time it's been used as a kind of a aesthetical style, and it's fakely made in some software. What I really enjoy more than mocking that is when I see, okay, it is actually some algorithm trying to do something, and by failing it reveals something from underneath. Something becomes apparent. So this deconstruction of imagery I'm really fascinated in. So let's show you a little bit what kind of works on the video side are a little bit similar to that and inspired me for my current research and work. Here's one by Martin Arnold, Alone, Life Wastes Andy Hardy, and I'll play you a little piece of it.
All right. All right. Stand.
So there's a couple of interesting things here to see. So from a short clip of not even a minute of footage, Martin Arnold created a, how long is it? 5 minutes 15 piece. Oh, this is the current time actually. 14 minutes. So by blowing it up, by repeating small parts, by creating loops, by jumping back. So there's an editing on the timeline. So there's a found footage material in the beginning, and then Martin Arnold, who's an experimental filmmaker, created this completely different narrative. He started, or one earlier piece is called Pièce Touchée from 1989, and there it was done on film. So he said, okay, frame number 45 and then frame number 58, and then repeat this 5 times and so forth. So he wrote a list, it's like a program, instructions, what shall be repeated and what shall be cutted and so forth, and gave this to a cutting place, and they tediously copied the same images from the film and repeated and so forth, and glued and cut it, so really with the physical material of film. Then this piece is already done digitally, so that is of course much easier than to edit this film in a digital way to create this kind of effects. And so there's this aspect of the change of the medium, so the digitalization, what happens, what becomes possible, what the methods created, or the technology provided creates a certain kind of effects. Then another fascinating thing for me is, of course, that things which in this movie are so fast happening and maybe you don't even perceive them, become very apparent. Of course, there's this in the movie, there's this son and the mother, and the son kisses the mother, and there's this really awkward moment. But of course, I mean, it's 2 actors, and then you start to see totally different things in this edited version, rather than if you through the editing there's some uncanny underlying things happening and becoming apparent. So he's undigging something, what is already in the material, but you can't perceive it if it's done, if it's played in the ring. Actually, the final scene is really nice. Maybe you want to see this? The kiss. something completely different. So a couple of years later, granular synthesis, also Austrian artists. They a artist group, one who's more focused on the visual side and one who's more focused on the auditive side. They've been working together and doing tests and different things since 1992. And this is a piece from 1996, Sweetheart. And I must explain that this is, of course, a really crappy web video version, and usually granular synthesis is, or was, they don't work anymore together, those two guys, was really famous for having incredible tech writers. So the galleries or the museums who showed their work, they had to provide a sound system which would be enough for a stadium, and had huge projections and really bright projections, and people had to sign that they're not that they're taking responsibility their own if they have epileptic conditions and so forth. So these artists really work with a kind of a, I would call this an overwhelming strategy. So just through the sheer size and the sheer volume of this work, it is very impressing, but in a very physical way. From that. Just imagine that's very huge and very loud. So another example how a decomposition of a material, of video material, is creating something or unveiling something new inside of the material. And of course, then if you look at Martin Arnold's first example, from the 80s, done physically cutting film material, then almost 10 years later using digital cutting technologies, but like Avid system, but of course not real time, and then granular synthesis doing it the first time in apparently in real time. They're a little bit. They didn't disclose much what kind of system and software they actually use. They always said custom software, but nobody really knew what that meant. So, 2009, I started to do, or 2007 actually, I started to do with a friend similar experiments. And 2009 I showed this work, which is a machine basically which does create randomly cacophonic assemblages of orchestra samples. So together with the image, you saw the sound, and you had like 4 layers. Those are 4 layers over each other of these samples being played and looped, and this machine created 3.5-minute songs in a way, which started very slowly and just with one instrument, and then culminated in some very fast and loud piece to start over. So now that's the part inspiration. Now I'll show you what I'm up to and what my current research is aiming for. So sampling. So basically what I'm doing is some kind of sampling, but I also want to show image. On this picture you see the Akai S900 sampler from '86, and it's the first commercially affordable device to play back sound files in real time on a MIDI command, and it had like a storage of 720 kilobyte, and then you could flip in the floppy disk to add some more samples. So when you think about what sampling became since then, and that revolutionized music, and since then samplers are not physical devices anymore, they are software, they're pieces of software. So today, when you want to have the grand piano collection of sampled sounds, you buy something online and you might get it delivered on hard drives, and it's terabytes, and then you can choose from 40 different pianos and can choose if it's the Royal Albert Hall or where it's recorded, and so there's been a grand development since that device, where maybe for a piano 3 notes over the whole thing have been recorded and everything else is interpolated, the volume and so forth. And today, where every note of the piano is played pianissimo, staccato, fortissimo, and so forth, and just the nuances in between are interpolated. So it's an explosion of data from 720 kilobytes to terabytes sampled information, and my claim is, or my suspicion is, that this might include video material soon in the future, and just how this might look like. So that's kind of the starting point. So I asked one of the students of the Franz Liszt Music Academy, she's from Korea, Hyujin Cho. I don't know if I pronounced that right. From the end, from the middle, and so forth. They're not. It's not the video which is played. It's just different frames which are accessed. So there's a name. I did some research. So it is called concave-sensitive synthesis, and this term has been coined by Dimo Schwarz in a paper 2006. But there's also other words for it, like musaiking, like music and mosaic. And for Maximus P, Dimo Schwarz wrote this external, forgotten name. Anyhow, William Brandt thankfully did something very similar and very awesome for pure data, and it's called timbre ID or timbre ID. And so I have in this cloud all this corpus of a cello, a corpus of all possible sounds of this instrument, or all sounds which are in these 4.5 minutes replayed. So another nice illustration from my papers, from my fake science. So this is what's happening from the brain to the brain. So the hand is controlling. I control my hand, then the Kinect sensor sees this hand, and the skeleton model is extracted from the depth image. Then the skeleton data is sent to Pure Data via Open Sound Control, and Pure Data is generating the sound, and then it goes into the sound card and the speakers, and then through my ear and the sound. And this is all happening very fast, but here is a huge bottleneck. So the skeleton model extraction and also the Kinect, those are the two culprits which are responsible for a very slow reaction. So what you will see it later, I can demo it in a few minutes, that for an instrument which feels natural, which feels intuitive, you need something like maximum 15 milliseconds, optimal something like 2 milliseconds of latency, of delay between your action and what you hear. With that, because of this pipeline, I have something like maybe 120 or so, which is not acceptable for an instrument, to act like an instrument and to play with other players and so forth. But it's the first test, and I have plans to optimize it, and I hope I can get it down to maybe 20 or 30 milliseconds in the future. So here's a video. Okay, I can demo that. I don't need to show the whole video. But you can see and you can hear that it sounds really crappy at the moment. And this has several reasons. And also, I'm not yet there where I use that model that only the right hand works at the moment. So later on, the left hand will control the volume. So all the grains, all the pieces, the particles of this cloud will play at the same normalized amplitude, and then the other hand will use the volume. So I can have more dynamics in the expression of the instrument. So are there any questions before I try to get it running here? No questions?
Yes.
Please.
I'm curious about how you choose the corpus to join to you. When you're using the granular synthesis, how do you decide how to decide which part you want to join together? You have any specific method to decide how to?
Okay, I'm not sure if I understood completely, but let me explain. There's granular synthesis, you mentioned, and then there's concatenative synthesis. And they're very similar, but there's a huge difference in the detail of the implementation. So granular synthesis is, you could say, agnostic to the content of the samples. So, or let's put it this way: both synthesis methods work with slicing a bigger sample in tiny parts. So it's a particles of a sound. And granular synthesis has just one vector, and it's the ID, it's the subsequential, it's the index number of which grain. So in granular synthesis, you play maybe the particle number 50, which is itself maybe 700 samples long. So that's maybe a fifth, no, a 20th part of a second. And then what you do in granular synthesis typically is you add some jitter. You start a little bit earlier and a little bit later, and then you create this very interesting texture sound. The problem with granular synthesis is it's very hard to control what sound you actually get out, because it depends on where in the sample you are, and you have to find this piece again and so forth. If you do this with this mosaicing technique, you first grade each grain and analyze each grain, so you get the pitch, the amplitude, skewness, kurtoises, zero crossings, and some really interesting analysis methods like Bark frequency coefficients, which will tell something about. You can use them to distinguish, for instance, in language, vocals, vowels. So you have not only a number for each sample, you have many numbers for each sample, which give you more information about what the sample sounds like. And then here I can take 3 of them. Unfortunately, we only have this 3-dimensional space. I would like to have more dimensions here. And then I take, I like to take a pitch on the y-axis. So here are the low notes, and there are the high notes. It's very intuitive. So it's, I don't know why it is, but you expect the low notes here and the high notes there. And then I can take 2 more parameters on the other axis. And what's very interesting is if you take a piano piece and you have the pitch on this level, you create layers because there's no note in between. You have notes very precise. If you have a bow instruments, there's more variation on the actual pitch, and they might not be so precise, so it's more dense. You don't have so much these layers. So you can already see a little bit what you can expect, what the sound would be from the image. So it's some kind of visualization of the corpus of the sound. So, does it answer your question?
Yeah, but I noticed one of your slides how describe timbre space.
Yeah.
So you just only use the timbre, or but you notice you use pitch or another parameter.
Okay. Here, that you mean? The title of the window. Yeah. in this case, I just say timbre as the whole, I don't know how to say it, the whole sound. Yeah. Okay. So let's try to get it running.
That's one window which I use is this Synapse middleware for the Connect, and it needs to find my skeleton. So this is actually the part which is most processor intense, and it's working sometimes not instantly. There's some kind of algorithm. Okay. So now is where my right hand is, and it transmits that through open sound control to PD. So we'll start with the analysis. We take a big threshold and we load the sample in it, and then we will analyze it. It takes a moment until it's done. Close this. This is then the visualization. Now I can choose three for the three axes. Here's the pitch for the y-axis. So here you see it changes how it looks. And we will not use the amplitude, but that. So we get a different image here. And now I connect to it. Okay, I have to see what's going on. show you this. She's waiting for input. One more interesting thing is here that we are in some kind of manual mode, and now you can move inside this thing like that, and let's zoom. And now you can go around like this. It's a little bit difficult with two screens. Make the pointer a little bit bigger, so that we catch always one of the grains. So down there we have some sounds which are more voiceless, they're more percussive, and they're the analyzers finds them as low. So you can also see that the analysis is not perfect. Here shouldn't be any change on the pitch. And what you also can see is that the mouse I used, because it was really difficult to see where in 3D space this pointer actually is. So I did some interface tricks that the pointer itself is a light source in this three-dimensional space, so I can see from the shading of the points a little bit if it's behind or in the front. And I also added these bars so it's a little bit better visible. Let's switch to the connect mode. Actually, I'm cheating a little bit here because the audio grains are so small, it would be only one frame. But because I wanted to have a movement there, I'm taking the next frame also as I wiggle back and forth between two frames to have a little bit of movement going on in the image. And what else can I tell you? Here's another trick to interact is that the hand position is also tracked, so I can zoom in when I go closer. That helps a lot to navigate. So it changes the viewport, like in a literal mirror. Okay, that's it. Somebody wants to try? Yeah.
So I just sit. Or I need to.
First, do you need to register and you? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now you can switch.
Trying to see the playground. This area, right? Sometimes the ball is so quick. Am I doing the right way? Okay.
So as you can see, it's far away from being usable, and I'm trying to. There's a few more things I want to add to try out to make it more usable. First, I want to use an interface which has a lower latency. There's this new leap motion thing. I hope that it's going to be a little bit better than that. And then, as I said, I want to use the other hand for the amplitude control, and also I want to morph between the now currently I only play one sample, one grain, one unit, and what makes sense is if you're in between two, to have both playing, but if you're in the middle, both play at 50% of the volume, and then to have some morphing in between the sounds. You know what I mean? So then it becomes more fluent.
Smooth.
Yeah, smooth. Yeah. So there's a few more things I need to add, and maybe it will take me another month or so to implement this. But I'm a visual artist, so I'm also interested in what it does with the image and the deconstruction of the image actually. So I'm learning on, I'm an amateur in music myself, so I need to find somebody also who wants to learn this kind of instrument as a musician. And of course it's a very stupid interface for if you want to play cello. That's important. But the interesting thing is you can do things with it, but you can't do with the cello. Of course, the cello is the best interface if you want to have a cello sound. Okay. More questions?
Well, actually, I think there will be more possibility, more potential than the real cello.
Yeah,
That's my point of view.
I hope so.
Yeah, I was imagining that using the digital software for a device like this, that I was wondering that a person he never learned the instrument, but he got a sense of this computer sense.
Yeah.
You can quickly, you can imagine that learning the cello takes years, right, to master. But if you got the principle of this software, you know how it works, maybe the same guy he can play 10s or 20s of instruments together. That's one man band. From one. That's my imagination.
Yeah.
Someday.
But the theremin I think is already a very complicated instrument because we don't have a haptic feedback. It's non-touch, so you can wave your hands in space and make a sound. So it's like a conductor. I think this is also kind of a handicap. I think instruments which have a haptic feedback can be learned much easier. So
I once saw a report as a device that you can feel the real feedback when you touch the space.
Yeah.
But also the device will catch your motion or detect your muscle twist or where you are going and give you pressure back to your muscle and skin. So I think that is another field people are working on.
Yeah.
I think there will be a kind of art that is all combined together. So denote that our era is doing not just the singing, dancing, or these videos in the group all together. And the most key is it's real time, right?
Yeah.
So people can do the scratch and whatever they want to add the originality. That's my thought.
So thank you very much for coming.